Hello everyone and welcome to today's session, and today we'll be discussing the theory related to the chapter Biodiversity and Conservation. This is the disclaimer. So what are the objectives of today's session? So today we will talk about the latitudinal gradient of biodiversity and we will understand the causes of latitudinal gradient. We'll also understand the species area relationship using mathematical equations. We'll also talk about the importance of conservation of biodiversity. And finally, we will visualize the effect of species richness on ecosystem stability using an analogy of airplane and the rivets. So today we'll be talking about the patterns of biodiversity, which is NCERT section 13.1.2. We'll also talk about the importance of species diversity to the ecosystem, which is NCERT section 13.1.3. We will summarize this entire session. We'll also discuss some NCERT based questions. We'll also discuss some keynotes that will help you memorize these topics. In the end, there will be some interesting questions that will enhance your critical thinking ability. Now, let's start with today's session. So first, we'll be talking about the patterns of biodiversity. Okay, so within this, let's talk about the latitudinal gradients. So what is latitudinal gradient? How can you define it? Okay, let's understand this. So now as we know, the plant and animal diversity isn't the same everywhere on Earth. Some places have lots of different species, while others have only few. So, it shows an uneven distribution. Now, species diversity generally decreases as you move from the equator towards the poles. This is known as latitudinal gradient. Primarily because tropical regions have more consistent, warmer climates with more sunlight and resources, fostering greater species richness. Okay, so there is more species richness in tropical areas due to these reasons, warmer climates. Okay, then sunlight, there is a lot of sunlight available there, there is a lot of resources available there. Okay, now the colder regions, like harsh polar regions, they offer few resources and stable conditions. So these, you can say, polar regions or the temperate regions, they are not that much stable also. Tropical regions are more stable. Okay, so that's why the species richness is less in the colder regions or temperate regions, you can say. So we can say species diversity decreases as we move away from the equator towards the pole. Or we can also say species richness is more in the case of tropical regions as compared to temperate regions. Now this pattern is what is called latitudinal gradient in the species diversity. It's a fundamental idea in ecology and help us predict where we might find the most diversity. In this image you can see latitudinal diversity gradient. So you can see how species diversity changes with latitude. You can notice here that near the equator, species richness is more as compared to that near the poles. Okay, let's continue our discussion. So let's understand with the help of examples. So you can see, let's talk about the tropical regions, those between 23.5 degrees north and south of the equator. They have more species than temperate or the polar areas. Now you can see, for instance, Colombia, which is near the equator, is home to nearly 1400 species of birds. Now let's talk about New York, which is at 41 degree north. It has 105 species of birds only. Then Greenland. So as we go further north to Greenland at 71 degrees, we find only 56 species of birds. Okay, in India, which is mostly in the tropics, also has over 1200 species of birds. This is another great example of how tropical regions support a huge range of life. So you can see these are all examples of latitudinal diversity gradient. Now let's talk about the Amazonian rainforest in South America. So this region is often called the lungs of the earth and is home to greatest biodiversity found anywhere on the planet. Let's talk about the plants in the Amazonian rainforest. So this forest has more than 40,000 different plant species. Moving on to the fishes, the Amazon is home to about 3,000 species of fish. Birds, there are 1,300 species of birds. Then mammal and amphibians, 427 species each. If you talk about reptiles, reptiles are also well represented with 378 species. Okay, from snakes to lizard and turtles, each reptile has adapted to survive in this lush environment provided by the Amazonian rainforest. Let's talk about invertebrates. So they are more than, you can see, 125,000 species of invertebrates. So it is widely held scientific perspective that a vast number of insect species in tropical rainforests, potentially millions, remain undiscovered and unnamed. Okay, so still you can see in the Amazonian rainforest at least 2 million insect species are yet to be discovered. Okay, so this is an image showing you Amazon rainforest. So Amazon forest has vast, dense and green expanses of moist, broadleaf tropical forest covering a huge area of South America. It is the largest tropical forest on earth, characterized by its extreme biodiversity, including millions of species of plants and animals. Now let's talk about the reasons or what are the hypotheses for the higher tropical diversity. Why there is more species richness in case of tropical areas. Okay, now first let's define what is meant by evolutionary time and speciation. So basically speciation is a process by which new species are formed over time. Now speciation is generally a function of time. So this means the longer a group of organisms has to evolve without major interruptions, the more likely it is that new species will appear. Okay, so that's why we say speciation is generally a function of time. So longer an organism or a group of organism, okay, has to evolve. Okay, if it is getting longer time to evolve and there are no interruptions during its evolution, then it is more likely it is that a new species will appear, means speciation will occur. More time, then speciation will occur. Okay. Now you can see temperate regions were subjected to frequent glaciation in the past. Okay, so these regions, temperate regions, they were not stable because of the frequent glaciation in the past. At the same time, the tropical latitudes have remained selectively undisturbed for millions of the years. So tropical regions were undisturbed. So this allowed for a long evolutionary time for the species diversification in the case of tropical regions. So in tropical regions, as they were undisturbed, so this gave more time for a particular organism to evolve into a new species. Let's continue the discussion. There is a question in your book and question number 3 which is related to this topic. Now second hypothesis or second reason is environmental stability. Okay, first one was evolution and the speciation, evolutionary time. Here we are talking about the environment stability. Now you can see the tropical environments are described as less seasonal, more constant and predictable. Unlike places with cold winters and hot summers, the tropics have steady conditions. Now, these factors make tropical environment more stable than temperate environments. This stability encourages species to become highly specialized, each finding its own unique niche. As a result, we see a greater variety of species living together. Okay, this is clear. So we can say that stable environment in the tropics allow for more speciation, which leads to higher biodiversity. Next one is solar energy and productivity. The solar energy available is higher in tropical regions, primarily because the sun's rays or the sunlight strike the earth more directly and at a high angle throughout the year, leading to more concentrated energy. So this contributes to higher productivity, that is higher biomass production. Now, higher productivity occurs when more output is generated from the same or fewer inputs, leading to benefits such as increased, you can say, diversity. So if the productivity is high, then there is more biomass, there is more energy available in the ecosystem. Okay, more energy will be available for the consumers. Okay, and it will help them to diversify themselves. Okay, the ecosystem is dependent on the base, its base, the producers from the base of any ecosystem or any food chain. If the productivity is high, then obviously it can support a large number of organisms at various trophic levels. Now let's talk about the species area relationship. Okay, first we were talking about the pattern of biodiversity. Now we'll be talking about species area relationship. So this section helps us see how the number of species changes as we explore larger areas. Now let's talk about Alexander von Humboldt. He was a very important figure in biology and geography as well. So Humboldt was a German naturalist and geographer. That means he studied living things and the physical features of the earth. He spent a lot of time exploring the jungles of South America. Okay, so he worked extensively in South American jungles. Now let's look at what Humboldt actually observed. So Humboldt noticed that as you explore a bigger area within a region, you find more species. So this is called an increase in species richness. Okay, so species richness increases as you explore the bigger area. Clear? So species richness increases with increasing explored area. So if you are exploring more area, obviously the species richness will increase. Okay, so this species richness increases up to a certain limit. Okay, it is increasing, species richness is increasing, but it will increase only up to a particular limit. Now let's talk about the relationship between species richness and area. So you will get a hyperbolic relationship. Scientists have found that this relation often follows a specific pattern called a hyperbolic relationship. This means as the area gets larger, the number of species increases, but not in a straight line. It starts to level off. Okay, so you will get a hyperbolic relationship, not a straight line. Now, to give you a real world example, researchers have observed that for many groups of organisms like plant, birds, or insect, the number of species found from a rectangular hyperbola when plotted against area. This curve showed that doubling the area doesn't always double the number of the species. Okay, so obviously the species richness will increase, but it will increase up to a certain limit. After that, it will level off. So this curve, this rectangular hyperbola shows you that if the area is doubled, This doesn't mean that the number of the species will also double. Okay, this is clear. Now, this is described the equation of hyperbola. So, this pattern can actually be described using a mathematical equation for a hyperbola. So, here's the equation. S is equal to CAZ. So, here S stands for species richness, or you can say the number of the species. So, this equation help us estimate how species number change as the area changes. Okay, here A stands for area. So, as the area increases, we can say the number of the species increases. Now, Z is the slope of the line, also called the regression coefficient. This tells us how quickly species richness increases as area increases. If Z is higher, it means if you explore more area, then the number of the species will increase. So, adding more area brings in a lot more new species. If Z is lower, that means this increase is slower. This increase in number of the species is slower. Higher Z value means the species richness is increasing, okay, at a higher rate. And if Z value is low, then this increase is slower. C is the y intercept. Okay, clear? Now you can see here, this is an image showing you species area relationship. Okay, so this is showing you how the species richness increases with the area. Here they have shown you the hyperbolic relationship as well, rectangular hyperbola, and you get a straight line on log scale. Okay, for the regular, for you can say for the rectangular hyperbola, you have the equation S is equal to CAZ, and if you transform it to the at the log scale, you will get this equation log S is equal to log C plus Z log A. Okay, here you will get a straight line. Okay, let's talk about the logarithmic transformation. So on a logarithmic scale, what was originally a curve, hyperbolic relationship between species and area becomes a straight line. So this line can be described by a simple equation. Okay, what is that equation? We have already discussed it. This equation is log S is equal to log C plus Z log A. This is the equation for the straight line. Here S is the species richness, A is equal to A is the area. Okay, Z is the slope of the line, also known as the regression coefficient. So it tells us how quickly species richness increases as area increases. C is obviously the y-intercept. So again, you can see if you can say on the logarithmic scale, this relationship becomes linear. This becomes a straight line. Okay, and the equation also changes. Let's talk about the significance of Z, which is the slope. Okay, clear? So you can see for smaller areas, the Z value remains remarkably similar across different taxonomic groups as well as the regions. It consistently falls within the range of 0.1 to 0.2. So remember this, for you can say smaller regions, the Z value is around 0.1 to 0.2. Clear? And then you can see for larger areas, for example, like entire continent, you have a steeper Z value. So the slope of the straight line is much steeper. Okay, the slope is much steeper, and the Z value will be higher. It will be in the range of 0.6 to 1.2. So you can say, you can say that if the slope of the straight line is steeper, then you will get higher Z value, and the slope of the straight line will be steeper in the case of larger areas such as continents. In smaller areas, the Z value will be low. Okay, and we have already discussed what does Z value tell you about. It tells you about the how quickly the species is increasing, number of species increasing, species richness increasing on on increasing a particular area. For example, okay, for instance, when scientists studied fruit-eating birds and mammals in tropical forests across different continents, they found the Z value was about 1.15. So this is a steep slope showing that as you explore larger areas, you will find more species. So it highlights how tropical forests are hotspots for biodiversity. Now let's talk about species richness and ecosystem functioning. Okay, now there is one central question here. Does the number of species in a community really matter to how well ecosystem works? Okay, now let's talk about what ecologists think about this. Ecologists has observed that communities with more species tend to be more stable than those with fewer species. For many years, ecologists have believed in this idea that more species means more stability. So, what makes a community stable? Let's have a look at some of the main characteristics that define stability in an ecosystem. The first characteristic is productivity. This means how much energy or biomass the ecosystem produces. Now, a stable ecosystem should not have wild swings in the productivity from year to year. Means there should be no variation in the productivity. For example, a forest with many tree species is less likely to have a, you can say, bad year of growth, you can say, because if one species struggles, other can fill the gap. The second characteristic is resistance. This refers to how well the ecosystem can withstand disturbances. A stable community must be either resistant or resilient to occasional disturbances. Okay, so more species often means the ecosystem can handle the disturbances better. Third characteristic is resilience against invasions. So this means how well the community can defend itself against new potentially harmful species that try to move in that ecosystem. Now, a stable ecosystem should be resistant to invasions by alien species. Clear? Okay. We're talking about the species diversity and ecosystem stability. Now let's talk about the work done by David Tillman. He's a well-known ecologist. Now Tillman set up a long-term experiment using outdoor plots, which are like small sections of land where he could control and observe what happens over time. Now, by watching these plots for many years, he could see real patterns, not just short-term changes. These experiments gave us important insights into how species diversity and ecosystem stability are connected. In other words, Tillman was able to show how having more type of species can make an ecosystem more stable. Now, what are the key findings? Okay, let's have a look at this. Now, one major finding done by Tillman was that plots with more species had less year-to-year variation in total biomass, which means that they were more stable over time. Tillman also found that increased diversity led to higher productivity, meaning these ecosystems produced more plant material overall. So not only, okay, so not only are diverse ecosystem more stable, but they also work more efficiently. Let's talk about ecosystem function and human survival. Now, species richness is essential for both ecosystem health and the survival of the human race as well. Now, even though scientists don't fully understand every detail about how biodiversity supports ecosystem, we do know it's crucial. It's important to realize that we are currently losing species at an alarming rate. Okay, so the loss of species can weaken ecosystem, making them less able to support life, including human life. Because humans, they are also dependent on biodiversity. We are getting all the products from the nature. Okay, we are getting all the food, we are getting the timber, we are getting even the you can say a lot of medicines from nature. Okay, now let's talk about the importance of species diversity to the ecosystem. So let's understand this through the river puppet hypothesis. So this is very important idea in understanding how ecosystem work and why conserving biodiversity matters. So this is hypothesis using a simple analogy to help us see how the loss of species can affect the health of an entire ecosystem. So let's see it. First of all, river popper hypothesis gives us an analogy for the ecosystem health. Now this idea was introduced by Paul Ehrlich, a well-known ecologist from Stanford. Okay, now let's talk about this analogy. Okay, here you can see an airplane is representing an ecosystem and the parts of the airplane. Okay, these are representing the rivets. Okay, parts, you can see the parts also known as the rivets, they are representing a particular species. Okay, so airplane is representing an ecosystem and its parts, okay, they are representing a species. So we have an ecosystem and we have species belonging to that ecosystem. Okay, now let's understand this airplane ecosystem analogy. So this we have discussed. He said that airplane is the ecosystem, rivers are the species. Now in an airplane, all parts are joined together using thousands of rivets, which are the species. Okay, similarly in an ecosystem, all the species are connected and they support the structure and function of the ecosystem. Now imagine if every passenger on the plane started popping out a rivet to take home. Okay, this means what? This means the species is getting extinct. So each time a species disappears, it's like removing a rivet from the airplane. So removal of rivet means species is getting extinct. So we can say here, now the ecosystem will not remain stable. Okay, if you remove parts of the plane slowly, then obviously you are dismantling the airplane. So slowly, initially there will be no effect, but later on, as you are removing the parts, then obviously the plane won't be able to fly. Similarly, ecosystem. Okay, if you talk about the ecosystem and the species within that ecosystem, so if the species is getting extinct, then obviously the ecosystem will collapse, because all the species, they function together to stabilize that ecosystem. Okay, now let's talk about the flight safety, or we can say proper functioning of the ecosystem. Now at first, if few rivets are removed from the plane, it might not seem to affect flight safety. Similarly, losing a few species may not immediately harm the ecosystem. So initially there will be no harm. Now, but if we keep removing more and more rivets, the plane become dangerously weak over time. In the same way, if species extinction continues, the ecosystem gradually loses its strength and stability. So the river puppet hypothesis explains that continued species loss slowly weakens the ecosystem, making it more vulnerable and less able to recover from the problems. Just like plane with too many missing rivets, an ecosystem with too many missing species is at risk of collapse. Now let's look at the importance of specific rivets or key species. Okay, so we said that we are removing the rivets from the airplane, or the species are getting extinct from the ecosystem. But what happens if main or specific rivets are removed? or if the key species get extinct. So what happens? Now, which rivet is removed can make a big difference. If we lose a rivet from the critical part of the plane, it could much more dangerously. It could be much more be dangerous than losing one from a less important spot. Okay, so initially, if we are removing the parts from inside the plane, if we are removing the seats and all, okay, then obviously the plane can fly. But if we remove some of the parts from the engine, then the plane will collapse. Similarly, if you remove the key species from the ecosystem, then chances are there the ecosystem will collapse early. Okay, so rivets on the wing. If you remove, suppose, rivet from the wing or rivets from the engine, okay, then the plane will collapse. Similarly, you can say if you remove the key species from that ecosystem, then the ecosystem will collapse early. Okay, so here these specific rivets represent the keystone species. So what is the keystone species? If this keystone species is removed from the ecosystem, then the ecosystem will collapse early, because a lot of species are dependent on this keystone species. So loss of wing rivets, if you remove the wings, if you remove the rivets from the wing, is obviously a more serious threat to flight safety than loss of few rivets on the seats or windows inside the plane. So it illustrates that loss of wing rivets or keystone species is a serious threat to the functioning of the ecosystem. Okay, now let's summarize the entire session. Okay, we talked about the patterns of the biodiversity. Okay, here initially, then we talked about species diversity isn't uniform globally, showing uneven distribution. So species diversity is spread across the planet. Now, species diversity decreases from the equator towards the poles, a phenomena known as latitudinal diversity gradient. We also talk about why do the tropics have more species. So these tropics, they have stable environment. Okay, they receive more sunlight. Okay, so that's why they have more species richness as compared to temperate regions. We also talk about species richness, how it increases with explored area. But this increase is only up to a particular limit. After that, it levels off. So you get a rectangular hyperbola relationship. Now, the relationship between species richness and area explored forms a shape called a rectangular hyperbola. In simple terms, this means the number of the species will increase quickly at first when you increase the explored area, but it will then level off. Okay. Now, more diverse communities are often considered more stable with less variation and more resistance. Okay, so if the diversity is more than in an ecosystem, then that ecosystem will be stable. Now, biodiversity isn't just important for nature, it's essential for healthy ecosystem and for the human survival as well. So the ecosystem provides clean air, water, food, and even medicines to humans. When we lose species, it's like removing rivets from an airplane wing. So we talked about the river poppet hypothesis. Okay, so here airplane represents an ecosystem and the rivets represent the particular species. If we keep on removing the rivets, if we keep on removing the species from the ecosystem, or if the species is getting extinct, then ultimately the ecosystem will collapse. And if there is an extinction of keystone species, then there are chances that the ecosystem will collapse early. Okay, so loss of a key species has a greater impact. Loss of a keystone species has a greater impact on the ecosystem. Now let's discuss some NCERT based questions. The first question is, which of the following best describes the latitudinal gradient of species diversity? So options are species diversity increases from equator to poles. Next is species diversity is uniform across all latitudes. Third is species diversity decreases from equator to poles. And the last one, species diversity is random across latitude. So what will be the correct answer? Option number C, species diversity decreases from equator to poles. This is the correct answer. So the latitudinal gradient describes the pattern where biodiversity is highest near the equator, means low latitudes, and decreases as one moves towards the pole, means high latitudes. This is evident by example like Colombia is having 1400 birds compared to Greenland having only 56 birds. Okay, this image you can see latitudinal diversity gradient. So it is the pattern where species richness or biodiversity decreases as one moves from equator towards the pole. Tropical regions near the equator have higher biodiversity while the polar regions have lower species diversity. Next question, what is the value of Z in species area relationship for small areas? Okay, they're talking about the small areas. Okay, options are 0.6 to 0.1, 0.1 to 0.2, 1.5 to 2, or 2 to 2.5. What will be the correct answer? So option number B is the correct answer here, 0.1 to 0.2. Let's have a look at the explanation. Now the slope in this relationship is called Z. It tells us how quickly species richness goes up or it increases as we look at larger areas. Now when we focus on small area, the pattern of species increases is usually steeper. Okay, this is clear. So when we examine small area, the relationship typically shows a steeper pattern. In small areas, adding just a little more space leads to significant increase in number of species discovered. This relationship in small areas is represented by a lower Z value. Okay, so if we consider small area, the Z value will be lower. That's why correct answer is 0.1 to 0.2. Okay, this is an image showing you species area relationship. So you will get a rectangular hyperbola. Means the species richness will increase as you increase the area. Okay, initially it will increase, but ultimately it will level off. So this number of species, it will increase, but up to a certain limit. Next question, according to Tillman's research, plots with more species showed. So options are more year-to-year variation in biomass, less year-to-year variation in biomass, no change in biomass, or decreased productivity. What will be the correct answer? Okay, let's have a look at the answer. Option number B is the correct answer, less year-to-year variation in biomass. Okay, let's discuss the solution. So Tillman carried out important studies on biodiversity and ecosystem stability. Okay, now let's focus on key findings. Now, so Tillman found that ecosystem with higher biodiversity, meaning more different species, have fewer ups and downs in their total biomass in each year, means there was less variation in the productivity. So this shows that greater biodiversity leads to greater stability in the ecosystem. Next question is, which of the following best represents the stable community characteristics? So options are option number A, high variation in productivity, low resistance in disturbances, vulnerability to invasions, and resistance to invasion by alien species. What will be the correct answer? Here option number D is the correct answer, resistance to invasion by alien species. Let's have a look at the explanation. So resistance to invasion by alien species is a key characteristic of a stable community. A stable community possesses a robust and well-balanced ecosystem where established species effectively limit or prevent new non-native species from gaining a foothold. Stable community resists changes and maintains its consistent species composition over time. Now, resisting the establishment of new invasive species refers to preventing non-native organisms from becoming harmful within an ecosystem. Okay, why other options are incorrect? Let's have a look at this. So, you can see stable ecological communities are characterized by consistent, predictable productivity over time. Okay, but this is not the correct answer. High variation in productivity. In stable environments, there is no high variation in the productivity. Then low resistance to disturbances. So stable communities should resist disruptions, not be vulnerable to them. That's why this option is incorrect. And then vulnerable to invasions. So stable communities resist invasions, not welcome them. So that's why this option is also incorrect. Next question, in the rivet poppet hypothesis, what do the wing rivets represents? Means rivets in the ring, parts of the wings. So options are common species, extinct species, keystone species and invasive species. What will be the correct answer? Option number C, keystone species is the correct answer. So, in the rivet poppet hypothesis, wing rivets represent keystone species that are crucial for ecosystem functioning. Now let's think about what happens if you remove a few regular rivets. Okay, we stand for the common species. So if you are removing some regular rivets, like rivets from the seats or from the windows, okay, so these rivers, these rivets, these parts, these represents the common species. So initially, if we remove these rivets, the plane will be stable, it will fly, and the ecosystem will be stable. But what happens if you remove the rivets from the wings? Okay, so these are some specific rivets. These are very important rivets, and these represent the keystone species. Then in this case, the plane will quickly fall down and the ecosystem will also fall apart quickly because these are the keystone species. Okay, clear? So we can say similarly, losing keystone species can cause an entire ecosystem to collapse, just like a plane would crash without its essential parts. Why the other options are incorrect? Now, common species are important, but they are not critical to the ecosystem structure. Removing them usually has less impact than removing a keystone species. Extinct species is also not a correct answer, so they are already gone from the ecosystem, so they can't be represented by rivers in the analogy. And then invasive species are non-native organisms that can harm ecosystem, but they are not considered structural elements in the analogy. Now let's discuss some keynotes. Okay, so Amazon rainforest, it's the region where with the greatest biodiversity on the earth. We also talk about the species area relationship. So it says that species richness increases with area, but up to a certain limit. So you get a rectangular hyperbola. Okay. Now we talk about the Z value. So this number tells us how quickly species number increases as we explore more area. Usually Z is between 0.1 to 0.2, but for really big areas like entire continent, it can be higher. Now Tillman's experiment. So Tillman showed that when you have more different species in an area, the ecosystem tends to be more productive, it is more stable. Then river poppet hypothesis. So this idea compares an ecosystems to an airplane held together by many rivers. We also talked about the key species. So some species play a much bigger role in keeping the ecosystem stable. If we remove these key species or keystone species, then the ecosystem will collapse early because a lot of species are dependent on this species. Okay, that is known as the key species. Okay. Now there are some interesting questions for you. The first question is, why do tropics generally have more species than temperate regions? You have to analyze this question critically. And the next question, what does a steeper slope indicate in species area relationship? Okay. Next question, according to David Tillman, what is the impact of increased diversity? And then the last one is, explain the rivet popper hypothesis in your own words. Okay. So you have to analyze these questions critically. Okay. So with this, we have completed the theory. Now let's discuss the DPP for this chapter. First question is, according to latitudinal gradient in biodiversity, which of the following region is expected to have a highest species richness? Options are Greenland at 71° north, New York at 41° north, Colombia near the equator, and last one is Midwest USA, which is the temperate region. Okay, the correct answer will be Colombia near the equator will be the correct answer. So near the equator. Okay, you have low altitude, you have low latitude. So here the biodiversity will be more. As you move from equator to poles, the biodiversity will decrease, the species richness will decrease. Next one, the species relationship is best represented by which mathematical model when plotted on a logarithmic scale? Exponential curve, rectangular curve, straight line, or sigmoidal curve? Okay, here they are talking about the logarithmic scale. So answer will be straight line, option number C. Okay, so usually you get a rectangular hyperbola, which says that the species richness will increase as you will increase the explored area, but up to a certain limit. But if you convert it to, or if you plot it on a logarithmic scale, you will get a straight line. Next one, for a species relationship within continents, the slope of the regression line typically falls in which range? So they are talking about a very large area continents here. What will be the Z value? 0.12, 0.2, 0.62, 0.1, 1.5 to 2, or 0.01 to 0.05. What will be the correct answer? Okay, 0.6 to 1.2 will be the correct answer here. Okay, means the species area will, or species richness will increase. Okay, and it will increase, you can say, at a higher rate if you increase the explored area. Okay, species increase in species richness will be higher. Now, which of the following is not a proposed hypothesis for the higher biodiversity in tropical regions? Greater niche specialization due to constant climate, frequent glaciation leading to rapid speciation, higher solar energy available promoting productivity, and then long evolutionary time due to stable conditions. What would be the correct answer? Okay, so here they are saying which of the following is not a proposed hypothesis. The option will be B, frequent glaciation leading to rapid speciation. So actually in tropics you have a stable environment. Okay, you have high, you can say, solar input as well. Here, frequent glaciation occurs in the temperate regions where the environment is unstable. So option number B will be the correct answer. Due to frequent glaciations which occurs in the temperate region or in the colder regions, the environment becomes unstable. So that's why the species diversity is less. Next one, if a species relationship for a group of birds in a forest is given by log s is equal to 0.3 plus 0.15 log a, what is the approximate species richness when the area A is equal to 100 units? So they have given area is equal to 100 units. So what will be the correct answer here? Okay, they are talking about what is the species richness. So here you can use the formula S is equal to C is Z. Okay, you can also use the formula log S is equal to 0.3 plus 0.15 plus 0.15 log A. Here directly you can put in the value of A is equal to 100. Okay, So if you solve this, you will get the answer, which will be around 5. Okay, so option number C will be the correct answer here. Okay, so if you use the equation log S is equal to 0.3 plus 0.15 log A, then A is equal to 100. Okay, then after solving this, so here you can put in the value of log 100 is equal to 2, and then after solving this you will get log S is equal to 0.6, then log S will be 0.6, then anti-log will be, after taking the anti-log of this you will get the value of 4, which is approximately equal to 5. Then again you can use the equation, okay, S is equal to CAZ. Okay, here you can put in the value of C is equal to 10 raised to the power minus 3. Okay, A is 100, Z is equal to 0.15. Okay, after solving this you will get the answer of 5. So here option number C will be the correct answer. Okay, so with this we have discussed the DPP as well. Okay, all our answers are correct. Okay, so with this we will end this session.